Hey everybody, John Skiba here from the Consumer Warrior YouTube channel. And in this video, we're going to do a really deep dive into Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I was messing around with Chat-GPT, with a little artificial intelligence here, and I asked it what the top 20 most frequently asked questions are when it comes to Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that's how I came up with this list. This is what we're going to address. So if you are considering Chapter 7 bankruptcy, these are likely questions that have been on your mind, and we're going to go through each of them and answer questions that I'm sure that you're dealing with. But if this is your first time here to my YouTube channel, please go ahead, click subscribe, check on that little bell. That way you'll be notified each and every week as that I put out new videos that help you deal with your serious debt issues. All right, so let's go over these questions. Again, I'm a bankruptcy attorney in the state of Arizona, and bankruptcy is federal law, so it is very common from state to state. So a lot of these questions are going to have very similar answers no matter what state you're in. If you are in the state of Arizona, I do a free consultation. My information will be below. Happy to meet with you and go over the specifics of your situation. So here's what I did. Again, I was on Chat-GPT, artificial intelligence. I put in a query on there saying, hey, what are the top most frequently asked questions when it comes to Chapter 7 bankruptcy? And I wanted to compare that to what I see day to day in my law practice. I've been doing this for about 20 years, helping people with the bankruptcy process. And you know what? AI came through again. The answers were actually very similar compared to what I see on a day-to-day basis as far as the types of questions that people have. So let's go ahead and jump into that. We're going to go through each of these questions, stick through to the end if you want to get a full idea of what the process is like and whether it's a good option for you. Okay, question number one starts off with really kind of big overview, basic question of what is Chapter 7 bankruptcy? So the Bankruptcy Code is a federal law, and it has various chapters in it. Chapter 7 is one of those chapters, and it's a form of bankruptcy that most consumers file. In fact, of all the types of bankruptcy, Chapter 7 is by far the most filed bankruptcy when it comes to individuals. There are also different chapters like chapters 11, 13, there's even chapters 12. There's different types of bankruptcy for different businesses, for cities, even for fishermen and farmers, things like that. So Chapter 7, though, is when people think of bankruptcy, it's what they think about. It's really designed to get rid of things like credit card debt, medical bills, those types of things that you're dealing with. So that's kind of the overview of what a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is. It's really designed to get rid of unsecured debts that don't have collateral or property attached to them. Okay, question number two, or most frequently asked question number two, is how does Chapter 7 bankruptcy work? For the most part, it's a ton of paperwork. So the typical bankruptcy filing, at least right now in 2023 when I'm filing this, is about a 100-page document. I say that because when I started filing bankruptcies about 20 years ago, it was about a 45-page document. So they keep adding requirements, disclosures, things like that. But for the most part, we disclose things about your income, your assets, your monthly expenses, certain financial transactions that you're required to disclose to the court. Now, when your bankruptcy case is filed with the court, they immediately put an order in place that stops all collections against you. This order is called the automatic stay, and it's a huge benefit because it stops everything from phone calls to letters to wage garnishment to foreclosure on your house. Everything stops once the bankruptcy case is filed. There's one meeting you have to attend. It's called the meeting of the creditors. It's really typically a meeting with a bankruptcy trustee and your attorney. It usually runs literally about 5 minutes, where they put you under oath and ask you if what you've submitted to the court is accurate. Now in Arizona, these are done over the telephone. Before COVID-19, they were done down at the bankruptcy court in Phoenix, but now they're actually done just over the phone call. It's not a big deal. Your attorney will get you ready for it. And at the end of it, you'll say, I shouldn't have worried about that so much. So from beginning to end takes about 4 months. And then at the end, you'll get a discharge order, which eliminates most of your unsecured debts. All right, the third question is, who qualifies for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? This is a great question because not everybody will qualify for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Surprisingly, it's not based upon how much or what types of debts you have. In order to determine if you qualify for a Chapter 7, we have to look at what's called the means test. The means test is where they compare your household size and your income to the average income for a household size in your state, and sometimes they even break it down by county. So for example, here in my consultation sheet, and these numbers are accurate as of May of 2023, these numbers change and they vary from state to state. So it's important to know that, if you're in California, if you're in Missouri or something like that, these numbers are going to be totally different. A year from now, 2 years from now, if you're watching this, they do change periodically. But for example, just so you have an idea, in Arizona for an individual, if you make $59,417 or less per year, or about $4,951 a month, then you automatically qualify for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing. Those are gross numbers before any type of deductions for taxes, health insurance, all that. So this is, right off the top that they're giving those numbers. Now it goes up based upon the number of people in your household. So for example, in Arizona, if you have 8 people in your home, this includes parents, kids, all that, the income limit is $136,000, and then monthly that's $11,335. And so it's important to know too that it's combined income. So if there's a married couple and both spouses are working, that you have to combine the incomes. So you can see it goes up quite a bit based upon the number of people that are in your household. If you're below those numbers, you automatically qualify. If you are above them slightly, there are deductions that can be made for things like mortgage payments, car payments, health insurance, medical bills, those types of things. For sure, if you're above those and you think you might still qualify, you need to meet with a bankruptcy attorney who can walk you through the means test and help determine if you qualify. If you don't qualify for a Chapter 7, you can always look to a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. It's a much longer process, but I always say it gets you to the same place and it helps you deal with debt in a very effective way as well. Okay, the next question, and question number 4 was, what are the advantages of filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Now, this is going to seem somewhat obvious, but obviously it gets rid of debt. That's the biggest advantage. There is no other more powerful debt elimination tool than a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Chapter 7 eliminates most unsecured debts. These are debts where there's no collateral attached to them. Things like credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, those types of things go away completely. They're discharged, there's no payment required, they're just gone. They can never come after you again. Secured debts like home loans and car loans, essentially you have to keep paying those loans in the event that you want to keep the house or if you want to keep the car. There's no free car, there's no free house in bankruptcy, you have to continue to pay on it. However, I have had situations where a client comes in and says, look, this car payment is too high, I can't afford it, and you're able to surrender the car through the bankruptcy and get rid of the debt as well. So one of the biggest advantages is its ability to eliminate debt. It also, one of the bigger advantages is it brings some structure to the process. If you're not in bankruptcy and you're dealing with collections, lawsuits, wage garnishment, all this, it can be really chaotic and very stressful. In a bankruptcy, as soon as the case is filed, like immediately after it's filed, they enter an order that stops all collections against you. They can't call you on the phone, they can't send you letters, they can't sue you, they can't garnish you, they can't foreclose, they can't do anything. Everything stops right from the very beginning and brings some organization and some structure to dealing with your debt problems. All right, question number 5 is, what are the disadvantages of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? One of the biggest disadvantages is that it's possible to lose assets in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The idea behind the Chapter 7 bankruptcy is it's going to get rid of all the debt. On the flip side, they're going to look to see, do you have any assets that are not protected by either a federal or a state exemption law that can be sold with the proceeds going to your creditors? Now, most things are protected in a bankruptcy. For example, most states have a homestead exemption that protects equity in your home. There's usually exemptions that protect vehicles, household goods, retirement accounts. The latest statistics I saw is over 90% of Chapter 7 filers don't lose anything as they go through this process. But one of the bigger disadvantages is the fact that it's possible to lose assets in a Chapter 7. It's also going to impact your credit. The Chapter 7 bankruptcy will stay on your credit report for 10 years. Most people will see about a 100 to 150 point hit as soon as the case is filed. However, one thing a lot of people are surprised about is how quickly they do recover. Most people's credit score recovers fully about 18 to 24 months after the bankruptcy is completed. For example, FHA, VA, they will do regular mortgage loans 2 years after a Chapter 7 bankruptcy has been discharged. Question 6 is, will I lose all my property if I file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? I kind of talked about this briefly in the question. As far as the disadvantages of it, you should be able to keep most things. Now, each state has their own exemption laws. So like Arizona, where I practice law, the exemption laws are different from like Utah or Nevada or New Mexico. Each state, it's very specific, and the dollar amounts that it protects are very specific. Some states, like Texas and Florida, have unlimited homestead exemptions. It doesn't matter how much equity you have in your property, you can keep it. Also, I've seen other states, I believe Kentucky was one I saw, where it was very small. The homestead exemption was like $20,000. Right now in Arizona, the homestead exemption is $400,000 of equity is protected, $15,000 of equity in a vehicle. Your retirement accounts are protected, household goods. So there is a chance you could lose property, but it's actually, particularly if you hire an attorney who can walk you through this ahead of time and really know exactly what you have, in most situations you can keep everything that you have as you're going into your bankruptcy case. Question 7 is, can I keep my car and home in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? The answer to this is typically yes. The number one thing you have to do is if you have a mortgage or a car loan, is you're going to need to continue to make those payments. I've had people come to me before thinking that they could file for bankruptcy and it would wipe out their mortgage and they could still keep their house. That's not true. If you want to keep your house, if you want to keep your car, you need to continue to make the monthly payment on it. Now, it's also important to understand what I talked about in the previous question is that there are exemption laws that protect equity in your vehicle. And so you need to know how much equity you have in your vehicle or in your house. Because if you have more than what the law allows, then even if you make your payments, it's possible to lose the asset as you go through there. So for example, in Arizona, the exemption for a vehicle protects $15,000 of equity. So let's say that you have a vehicle that's paid for, but it's worth $25,000. The court in that situation would take your vehicle, sell it, write you a check for $15,000 to cover your exemption, and then give the rest to your creditors. It's also true if you owe money on it. So for example, let's say you have a vehicle that's worth $25,000 and you only owe $5,000 on it. So if we take 25, subtract 5, there's $20,000. You only have $15,000 exemption. And so there's some non-exempt equity. They can still sell the vehicle. So this is something you want to have your attorney look at if you own a vehicle outright or if you own your home outright, or even if you have a loan against it, a determination of how much equity is in the home compared to the value and compared to the loans to make sure that you can keep those assets. So, but at the end of the day, I can tell you most people, keeping your home, keeping your car, as long as you're making the payment, it's not a big issue, and absolutely you can do that in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Okay, question number 8 is how long does the Chapter 7 bankruptcy process take? Most Chapter 7 cases, it takes about 4 months from the day that the case is filed with the court until the judge enters the discharge order, which eliminates the debt. Can take a little bit longer, sometimes it could be up to 5 months. And in rare cases, when there are assets that are going to be distributed or sold and the money distributed to your creditors, it can take considerably longer. But I can tell you in the overwhelming majority of the cases, it's about a 4 to 5 month process from beginning to end. Question number 9, will my debts be completely wiped out in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Most of your debts will. Most of your unsecured, what we call non-priority debts. So credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, those types of debts will be eliminated completely. If you've had a car repossessed and there's a balance that's still owed, that will be eliminated completely. Other types of debts like taxes, student loans, child support, spousal support, those types of debts typically do not go away. However, people may be surprised to learn that some taxes that are more than 3 years old may be eliminated. And there's a kind of a new trend where some student loans might be able to be eliminated as well. What we call domestic support obligations like child support, spousal support, those are never discharged in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And then your secured debts, like I talked about before, home loans, car loans, boats, ATVs, RVs, if you owe money on them, you're going to have to continue to pay on those or surrender the asset if you want to get rid of the debt. So if you're looking at a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, really what you're looking at is you're trying to eliminate the debt associated with credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, deficiency balances from repossessions. Those types of things will be eliminated completely. Question number 10 was, can I file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy if I have a business? The answer is yes, you can. However, this does get a little bit more complex and is for sure something you need to get a bankruptcy attorney. Here in my law practice in Arizona, we do file Chapter 7s for people who own their own business all the time. However, if your business has significant assets, and particularly if you're the only owner of the business, it's something that needs to be looked at very carefully to make sure that it's not going to impact the business and its ability to operate. If it is, then your better alternative would be a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Now, I can tell you this, sometimes people think that the business itself can file Chapter 7. Rarely is that appropriate for a Chapter 7 or for a business to file Chapter 7 bankruptcy because businesses are not entitled to a Chapter 7 discharge like a person is. And without the discharge, there's really not a lot of benefit to doing it. And I can tell you with most people, when it comes to Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the bigger issue, in particular with their business, is that they have personal guarantees on the various loans, and it's really a personal bankruptcy they need, not a business bankruptcy. Question 11 is, how will Chapter 7 bankruptcy affect my credit score? Chapter 7, most people, depending on where your credit score is at the time the case is filed, the higher your score is, the farther it's going to fall. If your score is already below 600, you're probably going to see about a 100-point drop. Like I said previously, though, people are surprised at how quickly it does improve. Once the discharge order is entered, it'll zero out the amounts that are owed on your creditors on your credit report, and then it's just a matter of time. For most people, it's about 18 to 24 months after that final discharge order is entered that they see their score fully recover, and then they then qualify for normal car loans, mortgage loans, credit cards, those types of things. So I don't ever sugarcoat it. There's obviously consequences to your credit score. It does stay in the public records section of the credit report for 10 years, but for most people, they recover within about that 2-year period. Question number 12, can I file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy if I have filed for bankruptcy before? This can be, and this is a little bit of a trick question, because you can file a bankruptcy almost immediately after you filed a previous bankruptcy. However, you're not entitled to a discharge. If you have filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and received a discharge in that case, you cannot file another Chapter 7 bankruptcy for 8 years from the time that the previous case was filed with the bankruptcy court. So the thing that you need to look at is, if you filed the previous case, did you actually complete it? Was it discharged successfully? If so, you're going to have to wait 8 years until you're eligible to file for a Chapter 7 bankruptcy again. Question 13, will I have to go to court if I file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? I can tell you now, in kind of this post-COVID world, it's highly unlikely you're ever going to have to go to court. And truthfully, even as attorneys, we rarely go to court anymore. If there are hearings before the judge, they're usually done via like a Zoom type hearing. Typically, the only hearing that you have in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is the meeting of the creditors with the U.S. trustee. The trustee, however, is now, in Arizona at least, they're all done telephonically. It's all done over the phone, or some of them are done via Zoom, but that's a 5-minute thing. But typically you do not have to go to court, and that only happens in very, very rare cases now. Question 14, what types of debts are dischargeable in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? It's typically easier to say what kinds of debts are not dischargeable. We talked a little bit before about domestic support obligations, like child support, spousal support. Those types of debts, they absolutely survive the bankruptcy. They are non-dischargeable. You're going to have to continue to pay those. Most taxes are non-dischargeable, whether it be to the IRS or to the state. However, if the taxes are more than 3 years old, if you filed a tax return for the year that the tax is due, and if they haven't reassessed you the tax in the last 240 days with some type of audit or some type of a recalculation of the debt, if those 3 requirements are met, there's a good chance that even tax debt will be eliminated or discharged through the bankruptcy process. Other than that, like I said, medical bills, credit cards, personal loans, those types of debts are dischargeable, meaning they go away completely. Secured debts, home loans, car loans, motorcycles, those types of things, typically those debts remain, and you just continue to pay on those so that you can pay off the vehicle. Question 15, what types of debts are not dischargeable in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? The main types of debts that don't go away are, as I mentioned, domestic support obligations, child support, spousal maintenance, taxes. However, there is a category of debts that can be deemed non-dischargeable if you have debts that are incurred through fraud. These ones are a little bit uncomfortable because you actually have had to it has to be shown and proven that you actually defrauded someone in entering into a debt. If the creditor comes in and objects to your discharge and is able to prove that the debt was incurred through fraud, then that debt would be non-dischargeable as well, and you'd be still required to continue to pay on it. Question 16, can I choose which debts to include in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? This is probably, in my practice here in Arizona, is probably one of the number one questions I get, is people want to keep out a specific credit card so that they can help build their credit, or for work, or whatever, to rent a car, those types of things. The answer is no. You must disclose all debts. And I tell everybody you need to you need to anticipate and be prepared for the fact that credit cards, particularly even if it's current, even if it's a zero balance, is going to be terminated. The terms and conditions within a credit card, they treat a filing of a bankruptcy as an act of default, even if you're current on everything else. So you need to plan on all of those debts going away. You cannot pick and choose. We even disclose like your mortgage and your car loans, even though you're going to continue to pay them, but all debts are required to be disclosed through the bankruptcy process. Question 17, will I be able to obtain credit after filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy? The answer is yes, and you'll probably be surprised at how quickly it actually happens. One thing that clients tell me all the time is that it's a little unsettling, the fact that they file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and within weeks their mailbox is getting blown up with car loan advertisements and credit card advertisements. The reason is a couple one. One is they know that you're filing for bankruptcy, you're eliminating a lot of debt, they're assuming you have more disposable income than you probably have had at other times. Two, as we mentioned before, you cannot file bankruptcy again for 8 years. So in kind of a weird, perverse way, they've kind of got you. It's something where they know that you can't file bankruptcy on their debt, and so they're willing to treat you as somewhat more of a good credit risk because they know that you're not going to be able to file bankruptcy on the debt. So you will be able to obtain credit, like I said, mortgage loans through FHA, through VA. Those are available 2 years after a Chapter 7. Other lenders are usually 3. Car loans, credit cards, you're going to get better interest rates the further you get away. And while it does stay on your credit report for 10 years, most people recover at around that 2 to 3 year mark fully with their credit score. Question 18, how much does it cost to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? This actually varies from state to state, and it varies considerably. The court usually does have some input into what bankruptcy attorneys charge, and most of us work on what's called a flat fee basis, meaning we don't bill hourly like most attorneys do, whether, like in a family law or civil type lawsuit. When it comes to bankruptcy, it's a flat rate. It's just one fee that covers all the work throughout the entire bankruptcy process. We file our cases for Chapter 7 for no money down, and then we break up the court's filing fee and the attorney's fees, and we break that up into 12 payments. So we try to do it so that it can be very affordable, that you don't have to put any money down, and even then our first payment is not due for a month after we file the case. So it does vary from state to state, so I don't know what it is everywhere else. I can just tell you here in Arizona, if you give us a call, we can go over that specifically as far as what you're looking at to get it done. I can tell you it's a fraction, though, of what you would compared to the debt that you're going to be able to eliminate. It's if I do so say myself, a pretty good deal as far as to getting rid of debt. Question 19, can I file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy without an attorney? The answer to that is yes. And I can tell you I'm seeing fewer and fewer people do that. I used to see early on in my career a number of people, but the bankruptcy code it's getting more complicated. As I mentioned before, the typical filing used to be about a 45-page document. Now it's about a 100-page document. And some people make the mistake of viewing it just as filling out some forms. It's very dangerous to do it on your own in that you can lose assets. They can go after back payments that you've made to family members, friends, if you sold assets or transferred assets. And the kind of scary thing when it comes to bankruptcy is if you intentionally don't disclose something or take things to actively hide assets, there can actually be criminal liability associated with that. And so my recommendation, particularly for Chapter 7s, like I was saying, in our case, you can get it filed for no money down. It's well worth the time to have someone who's been through this process like myself thousands of times before and really know the system. We know the local trustees, what's going to cause issues, what's not. It's definitely worth the peace of mind to be able to do that, and affordable for almost everybody in every situation to be able to make it work. And the last question is, what are the alternatives to Chapter 7 bankruptcy? The alternatives, if you're dealing with debt issues, there is debt settlement, where you can reach out to your creditors individually and try to negotiate a settlement with each of them where you're paying off something less than what's actually owed on it. There are companies out there that will help with this. I don't generally recommend them because often all they do is they charge you a fee to essentially help you save money. And then once they build up a balance, they then reach out to your creditors and try to negotiate it. The problem I see is that your creditors are not on board until they actually get the balance to start negotiating. And I see a lot of people who pay a lot of money to debt settlement companies only to find themselves getting sued by their creditors, and then they end up filing for bankruptcy anyway. So if you're going to do it, I recommend just reaching out to yourself. Debt settlement typically works best if you have 5 or fewer creditors and you have the ability to have a lump sum to negotiate with them to be able to work out some kind of deal. So the other alternative, bankruptcy-wise, like I said, is a Chapter 13 bankruptcy if you don't qualify for a 7, or if you are worried about losing assets. In a Chapter 7 bankruptcy or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy, you don't lose any assets. The trade-off is you have to make a payment to your creditors for 60 months, and then if there's a balance owed on those credit cards, those personal loans, those medical bills, after 60 months, after 5 years, then the balance is eliminated. The idea is essentially you're going to do your best to pay what you can afford based on a formula that the court has, and then at the end of that, they'll eliminate the balance at that point. The upside to the 13 is you can keep your assets. You're not going to lose anything. The downside is it's a much longer process, and you're going to be required to pay your creditors at least something through that process. So that's it. Those are the top 20 questions according to ChatGPT as far as what people are asking when it comes to Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Again, my number is below. If you're in the state of Arizona, we do a free consultation where we can go into a deep dive on your specific situation and help you determine what the best option is for your case. Thanks for watching today.